Hello, my name's Nigel Griffiths. I work in the Advanced Technology Centre in the UK as part of IBM Europe. This movie is about workload partitions, or WPAR for short, and application mobility, where we move these WPARs between machines. This is all part of AIX6. We're now going to use the command line to access and control our workload partitions. Right then, I'm using VNC to give me an X Windows access to our machine. This is SSE10. Let's just confirm the hostname here. Okay, now let's say we don't know anything about what's going on in this machine. We're concerning WPARs. So the first thing we want to do is ls wpar command. So here we can see first of all the names of the WPARs, and I've kept the host names the same to keep things simple. We have the state here. A is active, D is defined, T is transitional, B is broken. There's probably a couple more that I haven't seen very often. S means these are system partitions. There'd be an A in here if this was an application partition. And here we have the directory in which the file systems are actually sitting. We can go and have a look at those in a minute. Right, let's quickly see that this my WPAR is defined. It's not active, so let's start that up. Start WPAR, my WPAR, and let's actually time how long that takes. Also, I like to, when that's running, we'll perhaps we'll stop here, WP10. So we double check the options here. Stop WPAR minus H for hard stop, capital M for now, WP10. And I've got a typo here, so let's correct that. There we go. Now we can see here when we started a WPAR that took just about 7 seconds, so they're pretty quick to start. When we're actually stopping a WPAR, of course it's doing an orderly shutdown, closing down the processes and things, tidying up, forcing out the file system, and then actually stopping the WPAR. So that actually takes around 40 or 50 seconds, so we'll let that run. Now in the meantime, we're stopping this WPAR called WP10. Let's go and find out as much information as we can about that actual WPAR, the WPAR command, capital minus L, and the name, and we can find out all the details that we can find out about this particular WPAR. There we go. So it is of type system. It's created by root. The host name, the directory. We're going to have a look at that in a minute. Then we can say, does it auto start with the copy of AIX? No. Private / user? No. It's going to use a shared point file system, and it's checkpointable. So this is a WPAR that can be started and stopped. That also means that it can be we can use mobility to move it to a different machine. Here we find the network address for this particular WPAR, and the network details in here. Here are the file systems in here, so we can see that there are /proc in here. Not really a file system, but it's actually a device driver. We see /user and /opt here are read only, and they're based on the file systems in the global copy of AIX. And the other ones, though, the root, home, temp, and var are NFS mount points. And okay, and down below we have resource control. Yes, so we're actually using the AIX Workload Manager software to actually monitor the resources. The last operation that was performed on here was the stop. Down below here we have the security ratings. We just page up. Here they all are. If you're hot on rollback access control, you probably know more about these than I do. Then down below here we have some of the special devices that are also being assigned to this WPAR. /null, for example, there's a different one for each of the WPARs, so that you don't share that device driver with the global area. That improves concurrency and things. Let's look at these directories that are associated to a workload partition. We've got an active one here, so let's quickly go and have a look. No, there's an S on the end of the file name here. There's one directory in here for each of the file systems. If we change to a directory for a running workload partition. If you've used AIX for any number of years, you'll recognize what's going on here. This looks very much like a copy of AIX, and that's what we have. Let's now look at how we create a wpar from the command line. Here's our current wpars defined on this machine. Now we did have a wpar called wp13, and I've just deleted that and went to the NFS server and deleted all the files in those file systems. And we're going to recreate that now. Now I could type in the complicated command to do this, but I find it much easier to actually use a script, and I can get it right first time. So I have a little script here that is going to show us various ways of making a wpar, and then we're on one of these. The first one up here is the mkwpar command, make wpar. We just need to give it a name, and this is all we need to actually create a very basic wpar, and then we can build from there. But it would be nice to have it on a network when we start, so that we can telnet into it and access it that way. So this second option here, we have the details. We have a name of wpar, giving it the host name, which I'll keep the same for sanity reasons. Then we've got the network details with the IP address and the network mask. We also got a -r on here, which means use the DNS settings for resolve.conf from the global copy of AIX, so that our wpar will come up using DNS. The third one we have here is what I'll actually run. Has more details in here. I've split them across lines to make it easier to read. The first 4 lines we've already seen. The -c means make this check pointable, so that we can actually use wpar migration. And then we have 4 lines at the bottom here that define the 4 NFS file systems that we need to make this check pointable and relocatable. So we have 1 line for the root file system, 1 for home, 1 for temp, and 1 for var. And as we haven't specified them, we also have read-only access to /user and /ops by default. There is a fourth way of doing that with this little command here. We're using what's called a spec file. Looks a bit easy, but in that file we have lots of details, and we can see those down here. These are all the details that actually make up our wpar in these stanza format, and there should be fairly obvious what's going on there for the amount of file systems we actually want to use. There's some further details down here about security and the attributes to use. So we can use any of these different versions. I tend to prefer just using a little command like this one here, and we can create a spec file from a currently running wpar and then change that spec file to be a new version, for example, or we can use a spec file to, for example, deploy a wpar onto a new machine if we're doing it manually rather than using the workload manager. So now let's run this particular command and create a wpar. We can see the first couple of lines here. It's creating the file systems. It's creating, moving across a lot of files from the global system into the wpar. Then in the next phase we'll be installing various packages into the new file systems that we've created. You can see here that by default we have 209 packages, and this will carry on now for a few minutes. Okay, that's just finished. As we can see here, it's gone through everything. It took just under 4 minutes, I think it was, and at the end we got actually a failure message here, but this isn't anything to worry about. If you re-ring this sync root command, we are okay. It even gives you a prompt here that you can start up WP13, so let's do that now. Okay, now it's up and running. If we run this again, we find WP13 is there and active. And how can we actually access that? Well, we can telnet to it across the network, or we can actually directly access it from the global area that's actually hosting it at the moment. And we use a command called clogin to do that. So let's do that now. And we get logged in straight away. And hostname set correctly. And we're on the network with the right IP address. Now with the clogin command, this allows us to do things, for example, when we don't have a network or if there's a problem with a network. So we can use clogin to get onto the WPAR and fix the network settings. But I would ask a little bit of caution there. Any processes that you start with the clogging way of getting into the WPAR, none of those processes will survive a relocation or mobility. So you have to be very careful there. We're in a special sort of environment where we've pretended to telnet into the machine, but we haven't really. And processes created like this are definitely stopped whenever you do a migration. And application mobility via the command line. Well, I've got a little script here that will show us the basic flow of information and the 4 commands we actually have to run. On the source AIX machine, we're going to run this command checkpoint WPAR. Spelling is particularly difficult. This is a command that comes when you purchase the Workload Partition Manager, and it's a package that you install called MCR, Meosys Checkpoint Restart Package. And once we have this installed in our system, then we can run it. You'll find it in this directory. And we're going to have to tell it, first of all, the WPAR that we actually want to change by name, WP13 in this case. Then we're going to have to tell it a directory in which to put all the state information and all the process memory that we're actually using in our WPAR into an NFS mounted file system. So here we're using the /temp file system of the WPAR itself. We also need to tell it a log file, and that will keep track of how it progresses, and if there are any errors they'll appear in here so we can backtrack and find out what happened. Finally, there's the -k option. This is -kill, and this will actually, once the checkpoint has frozen the processes, saved them, it'll actually kill all the processes in the WPAR, so the WPAR will actually stop at that point. Then, because we're moving this WPAR to another machine, we have to remove it from this machine, so we're using the remove WPAR command. But the -p option here says to preserve the file systems. Don't actually delete everything in the WPAR, just disconnect from it, unmount it, and then forget everything you knew about this WPAR. Then on the target machine, we have to, it's never heard of WP13, so we have to teach it about that. We use that same make WPAR command to actually do that, but again we add the option -p to the same command so that it doesn't do a full install like we did with the make WPAR command. It accepts all the information and the files that are actually in the WPAR as is, so it works actually very quickly. It's just a couple of seconds to create the relevant mount points and the details about the WPAR itself. Then the opposite to the checkpoint command is the restart command. Again, we have to tell it which WPAR we want to be restarted. We have to tell it the directory in which all the process and state information was saved, and we have to give it another log file so that if anything goes wrong, again it can report what was the actual problem. And with those 4 commands, we can then do manual command line application mobility. Now let's take a very brief look at the alternative to system workload partitions, the application workload partitions. Remember, these are even more lightweight, and it runs a particular command. Once that command is finished, the WPAR is dismantled. When we're creating an application workload partition, we use, instead of the make WPAR, we actually use the WPAR exec command. Here we give the WPAR a name. I'm going to give it a host name in this case, and I'm going to run a very simple command, sleep 30, so this entire WPAR will only run for 30 seconds. It's already created it and it's already running. If we now quickly look, we can see we have a WPAR called temp and its host name is temporary, and we can quickly log on to that WPAR. Here we go. We can see that host name is set, and we can do, for example, have a look at the processes running. Very few indeed. In fact, the only real thing running here is the sleep command. Once that sleep actually finishes, we'll stop the WPAR and it will be removed. There we go, it's already happened. We've been logged off. If you look at WPARs again, and it's already gone. We can do many other things we do with system partitions. We can, for example, give it the network parameters so that it's on the network. It can then talk to other servers, or users can log on to it while it's running. We can also mount file systems, so perhaps the application actually needs some data. By default, it shares the file systems of the underlying global copy of AIX. So if your application workload partition writes to /temp, it's actually into /temp of your global copy of AIX. In the next movie, we're going to look at the differences between a workload partition environment and a global copy of AIX.